Remember that magical box that transformed living rooms into mini theaters, or the spinning card holder that was basically Facebook before the internet? Today we're revisiting 30 everyday objects from the past that have disappeared. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Video cassette recorders, or VCRs, were once a major part of home entertainment. They allowed users to record TV shows and movies onto tapes for later viewing. This was a big deal because it meant you could watch your favorite programs whenever it suited you, a concept called time shifting. VCRs also played pre-recorded tapes, which were extremely popular during the 80s and 90s. As newer technologies emerged, DVDs and streaming platforms started to dominate. By 2016, the last company still manufacturing VCRs shut down, as most people had moved on to digital viewing formats. Dial-up internet access was once a common method for getting online, using the public switched telephone network (PSTN). It began in the 1980s and became widespread in the 1990s. Access involved dialing a phone number through a standard telephone line. The connection happened via a modem, which converted a computer's digital signals into audio tones and vice versa. Dial-up was famous for its unique sound and slow speed, usually topping out at 56 kilobits per second. Over time, broadband connections like DSL and cable offered faster speed and convenience, making dial-up nearly extinct, especially in cities. Floppy disks were commonly used to store and share computer data. These small, square disks could only store a limited amount of information. The first versions were 8 inches, later shrinking to 5 1/4 inches, and then the 3.5-inch sizes, which became widely used. In the 1980s and 1990s, floppy disks were everywhere, particularly before hard drives became affordable. As tech evolved, they gave way to USB flash drives, CDs, and cloud storage, all of which offered more space and faster data transfer. Today, floppy disks are mostly obsolete, yet they hold an important place in computing history. Pagers, also referred to as beepers, were essential before cell phones became widespread. These small devices allowed you to receive alerts when someone wanted to reach you. When pagers beeped or vibrated, the user would find a phone to return the call. In the 1980s and 1990s, they were especially popular among doctors and emergency personnel. Eventually, pagers gained a bad reputation, as they became associated with illegal drug trade. These days, with smartphones and texting now the norm, pager usage has dramatically decreased. Cassette tapes, also called audio cassettes, were a favorite way to enjoy music in earlier times. A team led by Lou Ottens at the Dutch company Philips invented them and released them in 1963. Cassette tapes were small plastic cases containing 2 mini spools of magnetic tape used to record sound. People loved them for their portability and the ability to create custom music mixes. During the 1970s and 1980s, cassette tapes surged in popularity, especially after 1979, when the Sony Walkman allowed users to listen to music on the go. However, once CDs, MP3 players, and digital formats entered the scene, cassette tapes started phasing out. Today they're mainly found in the hands of collectors or used in niche music projects. The answering machine, a device used to take phone calls and record voice messages, has an interesting backstory. Though invented in the 20th century, its earlier versions relied on magnetic recording, first devised in 1898 by Valdemar Poulsen. The first practical answering machine came in the 1930s, thanks to various developers including Clarence Hickman of Bell Labs. However, Bell suppressed it, fearing people would make fewer calls. The first commercially successful machine, the electronic secretary, arrived in 1949. By the 1980s, especially after AT&T's restructuring in 1984, answering machines became more popular and accessible. Today most have vanished, replaced by digital voicemail, yet their role in communication history remains significant. Personal digital assistants, or PDAs, also had their time in the sun prior to the smartphone revolution. Bygone introduced the first PDA in 1984, though the term itself was coined in 1992 by Apple's CEO when presenting the Apple Newton. These handheld devices acted like mini computers and helped people keep track of tasks, appointments, and contacts. By the early 2000s, many PDAs supported internet access, and some even had touchscreens. Once smartphones entered the equation, however, PDAs quickly became unnecessary and faded into tech history. The yellow pagers were once printed directories that showcased businesses by service category instead of alphabetical order. The concept began in 1883, when a printer in Cheyenne, Wyoming, ran out of white paper and used yellow instead. That idea caught on, and by 1886, the first official Yellow Pagers directory was born. These thick books help people find plumbers, electricians, restaurants, and more, all before search engines existed. Today, with the internet making discovery easier, Yellow Pagers aren't used much. In fact, countries like the United Kingdom stopped printing them entirely in 2019. Cathode ray tube (CRT) technology was revolutionary in the evolution of screens, appearing in older televisions and computer monitors. CRTs worked by firing electron beams at a phosphorescent screen to produce images. This concept first appeared in the late 19th century, starting with the Braun tube developed by German physicist Ferdinand Braun in 1897. CRTs were heavy and took up a lot of room due to the thick glass required in their build. Modern displays like LCD, OLED, and plasma have since replaced them, offering sleek designs, lighter weight, and better energy efficiency. By the mid-2000s, CRTs had mostly disappeared. The Rolodex, a rotating card file system, served as a must-have tool for storing contact information in the pre-digital age. Danish engineer Hildar Nielsen invented it in 1956, and it soon became a worldwide office essential. The name Rolodex merged rolling and index, reflecting how it functioned. Each card could be handwritten or typed on, and users spun the device to locate names and numbers efficiently. By the 1980s, a fully packed Rolodex was even seen as a power symbol in business circles. As computers and smartphones gained popularity, however, Rolodex systems became rare, replaced by digital alternatives. If you enjoyed this American Rewind video, be sure to check out the next one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly supports a small channel like ours. It's late afternoon. The golden light filters through a dusty window and lands softly on a wooden desk. You're sitting there, fingers poised above cool metal keys. You press down, and the letter strikes, a decisive clack. A bell dings softly at the end of the line. And for a moment, you're not just typing, you're writing. The typewriter didn't care about speed or convenience. It wasn't forgiving. There was no delete key, no way to backspace and try again quietly. Every word was deliberate. Every line was made visible. You had to think before each sentence. It demanded your focus in a way that modern tools can't quite replicate anymore. In homes and offices across the country, typewriters once sat like loyal dogs, marks of pride, tools of trade, companions to journalists and novelists, poets and secretaries. You may remember the weight of your fingers growing tired from long use, the sound echoing through a quiet room, the scent of ribbon ink lingering near the paper. But gradually, the noise began to fade. Computers crept in with digital polish. And slowly those old Remingtons and Royals were boxed up, sold off, or forgotten in closets. Their silence became the new soundtrack of writing. Yet for those who remember, a single ding in the distance still carries the heartbeat of a time when words had weight. The classroom was quiet, except for the shuffling of papers and the low hum of a fan. Then came that familiar electric buzz, soft, constant, comforting. A portable cart rolled in beside the teacher's desk, wheels squeaking across the tiled floor. On top sat a transparent box with a glowing eye, the overhead projector. You might remember how it bathed the classroom in a gentle white light, casting images on the pull-down screen at the front, like a lighthouse guiding a lesson home. Transparent plastic sheets, called transparencies, were placed on its glass bed, each one scribbled with notes in blue or red marker. The teacher's hand danced carefully, writing backwards, upside down, or off to the side to stay clear of the beam. Sometimes the words cast shadows if their arm lingered too long, warping into ghostly doubles above the chalkboard. There was something oddly theatrical about it. The hum, the flicker of dust particles floating in the light, the slight blur when the lens wasn't quite focused, it was imperfect, but somehow magical. Not high-tech, but high-touch. Everyone leaned in just a little more. Today those once mighty machines are mostly gone, replaced by sleek screens and clicking remotes. But in old storage closets, a few still sit, lenses cloudy, cords tangled, quietly holding on to the glow that once lit the minds of a generation. The lights would dim, just enough for the room to quiet. You might have been stretched out on the carpet, chin propped on your hands, or curled up on a cracked leather couch that smelled faintly of furniture polish and the passage of years. The old slide projector rattled softly as Grandpa cleared his throat, already halfway through loading the carousel, where each tiny square captured a fragment of family history. Then came the first click, a beach trip, 1969. The sun faded by time, everyone squinting into its warmth. Uncle Terry with a farmer's tan and a half-built sand castle. Another click. A blurry shot of the Grand Canyon's edge. Then a laugh. Someone noticed Aunt Rita's photo went up upside down, her smiling face now peeking from the ceiling, still in that high-waisted swimsuit no one ever let her forget. The machine puffed warm air as the bulb glowed like something sacred. In the hush of that room, each image felt like a chapter, a vacation, a graduation, a baby's first step. Everyone spoke in hushed commentary, caught between memory and motion. The photos didn't move, but your heart did. Today we scroll alone through galleries that update automatically. But those nights, when stories were told on walls and time paused between slides, that was when pictures truly spoke. You held it carefully, sometimes with two hands. Not because it was fragile, but because every press of the shutter mattered. A 35mm film camera didn't hand you endless chances. You had 24 exposures, maybe 36. Each one was like tossing a little wish into the future. You'd frame the shot just right, adjust the focus, take a breath, then click. Maybe your cousin blinked. Maybe the sun hit the wrong. You wouldn't know until days later. That was part of the magic. Patience was built into the lens. You took the photo, then you waited. The film would sit in rolls on the kitchen counter until someone dropped it off at the local pharmacy or photo lab. And when the prints came back, tucked inside paper envelopes, glossy or matte, doubled if you paid a little more, they weren't just pictures, they were discoveries. And the outtakes. You didn't erase them, they stayed in the album alongside the good ones. A half-blurry birthday cake. A dog mid-blink. A thumb over the lens. Imperfect but honest. Today we take hundreds in minutes, tap, edit, delete, repeat. But with film every photograph was a quiet promise to remember. A captured breath, in time, waiting to be opened days later, like a gift you forgot you gave yourself. At one point in time, this machine was the beating heart of every office. It sat beside the phone, humming softly, waiting for its cue. Then in came the signal. Those strange high-pitched beeps followed by a burst of white noise static, like it was dialing into another world. You might remember that sound. It wasn't music, but it meant business was happening. The fax machine took a sheet of paper, anything from a contract to a sketch, and transformed it into sound. That sound traveled through a phone line and reassembled itself on paper at the receiving end, sometimes cities or countries away. For decades, this was regarded as cutting edge. It carried messages across time zones long before email. Hospitals used it. Law firms swore by it. A blur of smeared ink and curling thermal paper arrived with urgency. Documents didn't just arrive, they emerged. By the late 80s and early 90s, fax machines were everywhere. Then, almost without warning, they faded. Email marched in with cleaner lines and faster speeds. Digital files cut out the whirring middleman. Today most homes and even many offices haven't heard a fax tone in years. But in some back rooms, maybe a government office or a small-town clinic, one or two may still wait patiently, plugged in unused, and surprisingly still ready to beep. You'd snap open the lid, feeling the slight resistance of the hinge, and place the shiny disc inside like something sacred. Press it closed with a gentle click. A second later, The tiny motor would hum to life, spinning your favorite album into motion. Headphones in, volume up. Suddenly, the world slipped away. The CD Walkman wasn't just a player, it was a portal. A soundtrack for bus rides, bedroom walls, and after-school walks. Maybe you carried it in your jacket pocket, or wedged it into a backpack, careful not to jostle too much. If you moved too fast, the track would skip, a harsh reminder that this wasn't quite built for motion. But once steady, it delivered something magical. Your song, your order, your mood. Mixtapes made for crushes, burned CDs scribbled with Sharpie, albums where track 7 always hit the hardest. The Discman offered ownership, real music in your hands, not files in a cloud. It came at a time when we still flipped through album booklets, memorized lyrics, and listened to full records front to back. There was pride in the scratches, a kind of proof that something had been played, loved, repeated, rewound. Today our playlists flow endlessly. But the Walkman held your choices, pocketed them, and played them back in a way that felt personal. Like the world's noise dimmed, and just for a little while, the music was only yours. You could hear it before you saw it. The low thump of bass echoing off brick walls, the treble cutting through warm summer air. And then it appeared, heavy and proud, slung over a shoulder like a badge of honor. The boombox didn't quietly sit in your room. It moved with you, blasted with you, spoke for you. Built with chrome, plastic, and bold edges, boomboxes first hit the scene in the late 70s. But by the 80s they were everywhere, from city blocks to cul-de-sacs. You might remember lugging one to the park, needing 6 or 8 D-cell batteries, just to keep it alive. They weren't light, and that was part of the point. You earned your music that way. Cassettes would clunk into place, the play button stiff but satisfying. Maybe a cool Mo D track, or some early Beastie Boys. People didn't just hear your music, they saw it coming. Boomboxes turned sidewalks into stages. Break dancers slid and spun in front of them. Teenagers became DJs, curators of street corner culture. It wasn't portable in the modern sense, but it was personal. Loud enough to be shared, but close enough to carry. Today, music lives in earbuds, whispered privately from tiny devices. But there was a time when it rolled out of speakers proud and clear, letting the whole world know exactly who you were. You'd pick up the receiver, feel the cool weight in your hand, and hear that soft dial tone humming in your ear like an invitation. Then the dialing one number at a time. Your finger slips into each round hole, pulling the dial clockwise until it hit the stop, and letting it spin back with a slow whir. 7, sometimes 10 of these, each one deliberate. The rotary phone didn't rush you. It didn't let you. There was a rhythm to it, a kind of pause between digits that gave space to the moment. It lived on a wall or on a side table, not in a back pocket, and when it rang sharp and loud, you had to get up, go to it, and answer with full attention. You remember the long spiral cord, always tangled, stretching just enough to give you a little privacy near the kitchen door. Calls were made with purpose. You didn't call to scroll or pass time. You called because someone mattered. There were no missed call logs, no caller ID. Just the sound of someone's voice on the other end, and the knowledge that they chose that moment, dialed each digit, and waited all just to hear you say hello. Now phones move with us, endlessly in hand. But once upon a time, a single call anchored you to a spot, and brought someone a little closer than any screen could. It fit in your hands like a secret, solid and rectangular, with a little greenish-gray screen that came alive the moment you slid the switch. The Game Boy wasn't flashy. It had no colors to brag about, no internet connection, no achievements to unlock. But inside that tiny frame, entire worlds waited, the soft clicking of the A and B buttons, the little 4-way pad worn smooth from hours of movement. Maybe you played under the covers at night, flashlight clenched in your mouth, trying to beat one more level of Super Mario or solve one more line in Tetris. Its simple beeps became soundtracks to quiet afternoons and long car rides. If you played Pokemon, you probably remember the first time you caught a Pikachu. Your name in uppercase letters on the screen. Your rivals always just one step ahead. And if your batteries ran out mid-game, there was heartbreak. No autosave, no cloud backup. Just effort lost in a blink, and then the promise to try again. The Game Boy didn't ask for much. Just 4 AA batteries, and your attention. And in return it gave kids something powerful. Not just entertainment, but a little square escape right there in the palm of your hand. There was a time when watching TV felt like tuning into a distant world, literally. Before cables snaked through walls and signals streamed through fiber lines, we relied on rabbit ears. Shiny, extendable, and always a little crooked. These antennas stood tall on top of living room sets like chrome guardians of entertainment. Maybe you stood beside the TV, arms raised, one leg turned just so frozen like a statue, as someone yelled from the couch, "Right there, don't move." Sometimes aluminum foil was wrapped around the tips like a magical charm, as if that extra shimmer could catch a clearer picture from the sky. The clearest channels were never guaranteed. Depending on the weather, the building, or even where you sat, your favorite sitcom might cut to static or twist into a ghostly double image. Adjustments were part of the experience, a little dance with technology and patience. But when the image finally snapped into place, the celebration was real. Cheers from the room, a rush to grab snacks, and a shared sense that you had earned this episode. Today's shows appear with a click. But once it took effort and a bit of luck to bring the evening news or Saturday morning cartoons into focus, and that effort made all the difference. They stood like monuments on the shelf, uniform, proud, and a little intimidating. Row after row, spine to spine, the encyclopedias waited. Britannica, World Book, Funk and Wagnalls. However the name was printed, they shared a purpose: bring the whole world into your living room, one volume at a time. Maybe you once pulled one down for a school report, flipping to the section on volcanoes or ancient Greece, your fingers tracing the bold headlines. The pages smelled faintly of ink and dust, and the illustrations, usually just a few, carefully placed in the center, felt like treasures. Parents often bought them in installments from door-to-door salesmen, or through catalogs. Some came with gold-embossed lettering, others, oddly colored covers, and once a year, a fresh volume arrived with updates, reminding you that even knowledge had to be maintained. They were heavy, quite literally. You carried volume D or M across the room like it was sacred. Because in a way it was. Those books held everything from battle dates to dinosaur names, collected, edited, and printed with care. Today search bars answer in seconds. Definitions, images, citations, all updated on the fly. But once learning was slower, quieter, and far more deliberate. And in those thick pages lived not just information, but the feeling that you were holding the truth in your hands. The trip always began before the car even started. A paper map unfolded like a treasure, creases breaking the surface as wide as the windshield itself. It might have come from a glove box, a gas station rack, or a kitchen drawer stuffed with years of family routes and detours. Maybe you can still picture Dad leaning over the hood of the car, sunglasses pushed up, fingers sliding across highways and back roads. Cities were dots, state lines were clean and sharp, and legend boxes in the corner held mysteries. Campgrounds, scenic routes, unpaved roads. Every fold held possibility. There was no voice giving turn-by-turn instructions, just quiet arguments about whether Route 6 was faster than the interstate, and the eventual "let's just see where this goes." Sometimes a sibling took the co-pilot seat, tasked with unfolding sections of the map like pages in a story. Maps didn't recalculate. When you missed a turn, they forced you to look out the window, to ask directions at diners, to trust your own sense of direction, or not. And if you got lost, it became part of the adventure, not a problem to be fixed. Now we pinch and zoom on glowing screens, led by satellites and spoken words. But those old maps. They led with curiosity, powered by ink and paper, and the shared magic of not quite knowing what was around the bend. It sat in purses, desk drawers and kitchen counters, small, rectangular and dependable. The checkbook wasn't flashy, but it was familiar. Most had a faux leather cover, maybe with a little wear along the spine. Inside, pages of tiny lined checks waited to be filled, each one a quiet record of life marching forward. Perhaps you recall writing the date in the top right corner, signing your name just above that narrow line across the bottom. Paying rent meant flipping open the book. Gifts, groceries, electric bills, each transaction passed through your own hands, each amount neatly recorded in the register beside it. There was something trustworthy about it. You kept a running tally, wrote numbers carefully in their little boxes, dotted your decimal points with intention. Some checks had carbon copies, a page underneath that traced your handwriting, leaving a faint blue shadow behind. Banks didn't update in real time. You could overdraw if you weren't careful, and many people balanced their books with a calculator late at night. But it was personal, a ritual. Today we swipe, we tap, we send payments wirelessly with emojis and emojis alone. But the checkbook asked you to slow down, to consider, to make every dollar a little more tangible, and every signature a small quiet commitment. There was a time when making a copy didn't mean pressing a button or scanning to cloud storage. It meant reaching into a drawer, pulling out a thin filmy layer of dark blue paper, and carefully sandwiching it between two clean sheets. Carbon copy paper, smudgy, inky, and strangely satisfying, was how people left a paper trail long before printers became household items. Offices used it for memos. Banks used it for receipts. Government agencies relied on it for forms in triplicate. Even school permission slips came home on those familiar layered pads, where one pen stroke echoed through every sheet. Faint blue fingerprints would end up on everything. Your hands, your desk, sometimes your clothes. The paper left behind more than copies. It left evidence of effort, of presence. Today's records drift in and out of digital folders, backed up in bits and bytes. But those older files, wrinkled at the corners stapled and inked, spoke not just of what was documented, but how it was made. One press, one mark, one carbon-clad gesture at a time. They sat perched at checkout counters like little creatures from a sci-fi movie, wide-lensed and blinking with a soft red glow. The early barcode scanners didn't hum with confidence. They chirped and hesitated, often needing a second or third pass to cooperate. But still, they felt like magic. These machines marked a turning point. No more punching in every price by hand. No more paper tags on every item. For the first time, products spoke through lines, black and white, thick and thin, read by lasers rather than eyes. It was slow, but still so new. The screens were green or orange, boxes bulky, cords coiled like telephone cables. But behind all that was a future beginning to form, one blip at a time. Now scanners are fast, silent, even, sleek, hidden, contactless. But once technology announced itself boldly, awkward, blinking and maybe a little stubborn, and the checkout line became one of the first places where progress made a noise you could actually hear. They once stood everywhere in rows at airports, bolted to bus stations, tucked into quiet gas station corners. Tall, metallic, often scratched and scuffed, the payphone was like a quiet sentinel. You might remember the metallic clunk as the receiver came off the hook, the coldness of the handle, the hum of a dial tone in your ear. A handful of loose change was all you needed. One coin to connect. Local calls for 25 cents. Long distance. That took more, plus a quick calculation in your head, if you could afford the extra minutes. And always, the prayer that the person on the other end would pick up. Numbers were memorized then. Home, mom's work, your best friend. There wasn't a contact list to save you. You carried those numbers in your mind like tiny lifelines. Most are gone now. A few remain, rusting quietly, broken glass and fading buttons. Once vital, now relics. They don't ring anymore, but if they could, imagine the thousands of stories still echoing through their wires. It looks like a ruler, but in the right hands it could solve equations, calculate trajectories, even land rockets on the moon. Before graphing calculators, scientists used slide rules with wonder and precision. In this quiet chapter, we remember the analog minds that shaped the digital future. There was a time when getting ice wasn't as easy as pressing a button on the fridge door. It took planning, patience, and a bit of muscle. The old metal ice tray waited quietly in the freezer, filled with water poured by hand. Hours passed before it transformed, never quickly, but always reliably, into jagged little blocks of cold. You might remember the sound it made, the aluminum groaning as you twisted the tray, or if you had the kind with the lever, that satisfying crack as it split the frozen cubes loose in one mechanical motion. More often than not, they didn't all come out. A few would stick, waiting for a second pull or a good tap on the counter. Some people ran them under warm water to speed things up. Others just yanked harder. Either way, it was a process, not just a convenience, but a little ritual in the rhythm of daily life. The cubes it made were never perfectly shaped, odd, chipped, clunky, but they cooled your drink just the same. Lemonade, iced tea, maybe a Saturday night soda in a tall glass. Today, ice falls smoothly from modern dispensers, uniform, silent, cold without effort. But in those metal trays, cooling a drink meant a short wait, a small action, and the quiet satisfaction of earning it. The chalkboard stood tall at the front of every classroom, green or black, sometimes streaked, always well worn. Lessons began and ended there, drawn in thick strokes of white or yellow or pastel blue. You might remember the scent, the faint, dry sting of chalk dust in the air, and the sound, that unmistakable screech when the chalk caught the board just wrong. At the end of the day, or between lessons, the eraser came out, a soft block of felt-covered wood, worn down in the middle from countless hands. It thudded softly against the board, leaving behind smudged clouds that didn't quite disappear. The more you erased, the more ghost marks stayed behind, little echoes of equations, diagrams, and hurried notes scribbled before the bell. Sometimes a student was chosen to clean the erasers outside, clapping them together under the sun, sending a puff of white into the wind. There was pride in it, simple, dusty pride. Now, classrooms glow with digital screens. Mistakes vanish without a trace. But once upon a time, learning left residue, lines of chalk across fingers, particles drifting through quiet hallways, and soft eraser prints that said something was learned here, something was shared, and tomorrow the board will be clean, ready to begin again.